Hi and welcome all. I'm Josh Stevens. You're here listening to Cara and myself discussing what a day in the life of a midwife looks like or sounds like. Cara, welcome.
Thank
Who are
you.
you? And what have you done?
Okay, so yes, I'm Cara and I am a midwife. And I'm looking forward to telling you all about what a typical day would look like.
Bring it on. Bring it on. I mean, not a healthcare professional myself, so I'm aware some of what goes on. So it'd be great to hear what it looks like on a day to day. What are the different various checks and documentation or the patient interactions that you have?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to cover, to be fair. I think, first of all, it's handy to sort of recognise that there's many different areas within maternity that require different things. So you have, I think people always think of the delivery suite when they're thinking about what a midwife does. But you also have other areas where you have antenatal care, you have almost like a GP surgery, if you like, which is where women might go for sort of regular blood pressure checks that sort of prearranged. You also have triage like you would get in A&E, where women kind of come up with more emergency things. And then you have the postnatal wards after you've had the baby. And then you've also got community areas, which is where a lot of the antenatal care happens throughout pregnancy. So there's different areas where care takes place for specific different things, but all of them have the similar running theme of a lot of work. So, if I was to talk you through, let's do like a typical labour ward shift, which is generally, sort of 12 and a half hours per shift. And that can look very different.
12 and a half hours per shift.
Yeah, so you'll do like 7:30 in the morning to 8 or 8:30 at night.
It's what, you just go home and go straight to bed?
Yep. Pretty much.
Okay,
yeah. And night shifts are pretty much the same. So you would start at 7:30 and then leave around 8:30. So in the morning. Yeah, so they're long shifts. So you can imagine that there's a lot that can happen in that time. And I think because of the very nature of what a labour ward is, it can change pretty much hour by hour, sometimes minute by minute. So it's a very high-pressured environment to be in. But pretty much every shift will start with a handover. So you would all have like a team brief, if you like, where the coordinator will give a handover of notable events. So, for instance, that could be anything from one of the scanner machines isn't working and you need to get it from somewhere else, or it might be to do with patients that we're aware of that are high risk that may present during that shift, or it might be down to sort of there's upcoming training and who wants to book onto it. So it's very general, that kind of handover at the beginning of shift. And then you'll get a bit of a handover about the ward itself. So you'll get a bit of patient information.
So with these handovers, I mean, just before you mentioned all the different sort of areas, the delivery suite, the antenatal care, postnatal wards, triage or community areas and things, is the handover covering all of these areas?
No. So each area will have, typically you'll have a midwife who is based in that area for a period of time. And that period of time could be 6 months, it could be 6 years. Some hospitals have like rotational midwives who go round to all different areas for a certain amount of time. Others have like core midwives, so they're based there all the time. And there should be a skill set mix as well. So you should have the rotational based with a number of core staff. So you have that mix of experience. But when you start your day on the shift, the handover will be just for that area.
Okay.
So you're getting the relevant information about what's going on in antenatal ward or labour ward, etc. So it's kind of a general overview of that particular unit for the day or for the shift or whatever it is. And once you've had that kind of general overview, you're then assigned your patients for the day. and then you will go and take a handover from the member of staff who's been looking after them for the shift before. And that's where you get your individual handover. So on a labour ward, you'll get one patient who is yours and you're only with them. We call that one-to-one care. So that will be a very high risk scenario. Other areas, you know, for instance, antenatal, postnatal, you might get 4 or 6 patients and you're looking after a group of people because it's less intense. So for labour ward, for instance, delivery suite, you'll take your handover about what's been done in the previous shift and what the intentions are for the upcoming shift, whether there's been a handover from a senior obstetrician about a care plan. All of that is all factored in, and then you can start to picture kind of what your day is going to look like and what you're going to do next. And that's before we've even done anything.
But I mean, I guess so much of being able to deliver the best patient outcomes is being prepared, understanding what's coming up.
Yeah.
Because things can change quickly, I'm sure, for the patients and what their needs are.
Yes.
So knowing what your day is going to look like so you kind of can balance them all is pretty key.
And it gives you the opportunity to prioritise what tasks you need to do sooner than others. So, for instance, if it's, I don't know, taking a bowl out of the room, it's not high on your priority list if that woman needs bloods done, for instance. So it kind of gives you an idea of what you're looking at doing more urgently, depending on what the care plan is. And also you then need to think about what you need to do in order to get to doing that task. So before you do anything else, you need to do your room check. So you need to make sure that your room has all of the equipment that you need. So it needs to have perhaps an infusion pump. It maybe needs to have an epidural pump. It needs to maybe have a blood pressure machine, either manual or electronic. You need to make sure that your room is clean, because, you know, infection control is a big part of what we do as well. And that comes down to your environment. And then you've got your safety checks. So when you've got the equipment that you need to make sure that it's working and it has the correct lines on it, or, you know, so there's all of that kind of other side of not just the patient care, but your environmental care and your equipment care as well.
So there must be so many things that you cannot change, have to follow process, and that is all of that sort of clinical environment, like the safety checks. And then there's so much more that has to be so adaptable to what's going on, particularly around the patient care. Sort of, this was what the care plan was, but new things come to light. So you're trying to balance, these are rigid processes and policies I need to follow, and then these are things that are changing by the moment, depending on the things going on. Like, how do you take that on? Like,
you need to be able to have 15 different thought processes in your head at the same time.
So super simple.
Yeah, it's that easy. I always say you have to be 3 to 5 steps ahead in your thought process when you're on a typical day on a labour ward, because you are not only thinking about what you're doing in that moment, but you're thinking about what potentially that might lead on to and where that might end up. So you're almost kind of preempting your entire day throughout the day, which is, you know, very stressful. And when you think you've got to maintain that level of concentration for potentially 11 and a half, 12 hours, you know, when you take out your lunch break from there, it's mentally very, very, very taxing. But it's also, on the flip side of that, you know, no 2 days are ever the same. So it's challenging and rewarding in equal measure.
I mean, that's what I think a lot of people are looking for in their jobs.
Yeah.
It comes with a much higher risk with what the job is.
It really does. It really does. And, you know, basically, when you walk into your room, you're already thinking of the basic things that you need to do, but you're also thinking about potentially what is it that I'm going to have to be doing that might take priority over those other things. So you're then, again, prioritising the need at that precise moment. I've walked into many a labour room where, you know, I'm thinking, I'm going to take a handover, then I'm going to do my room checks, then I'm going to do my observations, and then I'm going to get on with my tasks. But you walk into a room and all of a sudden the emergency buzzer is going off and you've not done a single thing, let alone taken a handover of who this woman is, let alone said hello. And already you're like, hi, my name's Cara. I'm just going to go and get changed into scrubs so that I can assist you into theatre. And, you know, for all intents and purposes, you might have this plan in your head and have to abandon it immediately because that's how quickly things can change.
I mean, you're trying to balance how do you deliver that optimal patient care with there's still certain checks you need to do. So there's some things, documentation required, or some administrative things. Are you empowered to prioritize? Or is there certain things where they're like, no matter what, you need to follow this process?
There's definitely things where no matter what, you need to follow the process. But, you know, I think when you talk about midwives, we always say we're autonomous practitioners. You know, we are in charge of a lot of decisions. And I think it really becomes obvious when you compare a nursing role to a midwifery role. And this is not nursing bashing because it is equally as stressful and hard. But with a midwifery role, you are also a prescriber. You are making decisions in the absence of a more senior obstetrician team sometimes. You know, if there's another emergency going on and I think that my care that I'm giving is going to result in also going down the same road, I need to manage that situation until an obstetrician is available. So I'm having to make decisions based on what I know at that precise time until that arrives. And then on top of that, you're also being a birth partner. You're also being a support to their birth partner. You're also documenting, you're maintaining your legal boundary and creating a legal document. So in essence, you're also a lawyer, you know, and you're also the person that patient is looking to provide them with the information. So you're an educator. You know, they're asking you, am I going to be okay? Am I going to die? Which is, you know, a question which you get a lot because in that kind of intense emergency situation, you always think the worst thing. So you're also a therapist. And, you know, so you have all of these different hats, which you have to take off and put on. And all the while you're thinking, okay, so I need to do this, but I also need to, I don't know, put a catheter in the woman, put a cannula in the woman. I need to also make sure that CTG is running correctly and picking up baby's heartbeat, and also making sure that the labour ward coordinator knows what's going on in this room. And so there's many, many different things that are going on at the same time, which makes it very, very high pressured.
High pressure, stressful. I mean, to be able to transition and know which hat to put on each time, and there's so many different ones you're wearing. I mean, complex.
It is very, very complex. And I think it does take a certain amount of almost thick skin because you're trying to do all of these different things whilst other people are trying to do things who are also looking at you to do things for them. And, you know, sometimes there's been situations where, you know, I've gone into theatre with the obstetric team for an emergency caesarean section. Now, I've got a million jobs to do, which is to help prepare the woman for her caesarean, be her birth support and, you know, prepare the resuscitator for the baby and get the CTG running and document and admit the woman into theatre and all of these other things. And then the obstetrician will come in and go, midwife, can you please take the sheet off the lady? And you're like, wow, okay, let me just, you know, that's not my priority. I understand it's your priority because you want to get on with that, but surely there's somebody else to do that, you know, and you do have to have a little bit of assertiveness about you sometimes to kind of deal with that stressful environment that's stressful for everybody, but also, you know, not create conflict in front of anybody. It's a balancing act for sure.
Yeah, you've got to be the right kind of people person. Yes. And it's not about being a people pleaser.
No.
But kind of molding to what the situation needs.
Yeah, absolutely. And just being aware of, you know, other people are under a different kind of stress or a similar kind of stress to what you're doing, but their priorities are different to yours. And you have to kind of remember that.
Absolutely. Do you think that in order to sort of better support the department, these sorts of roles, is there a different need and change for the support given by the hospital or things the government sets up? Is there, you know, different training or?
I think So when I first started my training, I knew it was stressful because I'm not naive. I knew it wasn't about cuddling newborn babies because, I mean, I can't remember the last time I cuddled a newborn baby. People often think that they have this misconception that, oh, let's just get to cuddle babies all day. I'm like, no, I literally just hand them over to the mother and that's it. My job is done. I don't go near them after that. So I wasn't naive when I went into my training, but I definitely wasn't prepared for the layers of responsibility and the layers of stress that come alongside it. And I think if you were to speak to any midwife, when they tell you about when they first qualify, they will tell you that they stood in a cupboard crying somewhere on their first shift.
I mean, I totally understand it, just sitting here listening to you.
I mean, I cried in that cupboard many times, to be completely honest with you. But, you know, you do kind of learn to adapt and you learn to juggle all of these different balls and you learn to think 3 steps ahead and you learn to preempt what might happen. And when you start to develop that way of thinking, you kind of then start to get into a routine of the things that you are going to do in order to cope with that stress when it comes.
I mean, not having worked in that department, obviously myself, my experience is what you see on movies, it's what you see on TV shows, which typically are positive experiences. But then I had a lot of friends that have gone through and had negative experiences where it's been quite horrific. So you obviously see the full array of emotions. It's a roller coaster. You have some great outcomes, some bad outcomes.
Yep.
How do you manage that and its impact on yourself? Because it's an emotion. You have to be emotionally invested, but you also have to protect yourself. How do you do that in that role?
It takes a lot of learning, really. And they do teach you about this in university. They teach you about doing reflections. So when something happens, whether it's positive or whether it's negative, they teach you how to reflect on that entire episode in a very methodical and logical way so that you can process it. And that becomes a skill. So, you know, I've had the highest of highs and I've had the lowest of lows. And I look at both of those ends of the spectrum as being an absolute privilege to be involved in. And I like to think that what I've done has made a difference, whether that be, you know, that this woman's had a fantastic, amazing experience. And I'd like to think that maybe I've helped to facilitate that. And at the other end of the spectrum, I mean, I've had, you know, stillbirths. I've even had in antenatal clinic in community when I was just doing a routine antenatal check and listening into a baby to find there was no heartbeat. And having to send that woman to the hospital to then be told that her baby has died 2 days after her due date. And I look at that and I still reflect on it now because, you know, I'm going to carry that with me forever. It was a real low point. But I look back and I think about how did I handle that? Was I caring to her needs at that time? Did I give her the facts without being falsely reassuring, but also not harsh? And it's a real skill to kind of deliver that kind of news without giving false hope, but also not being a robot about it. But that's a skill that you learn over time. And it does come from reflecting on the care that you've given and doing the things that you did right again and improving the things that you maybe didn't like as much for next time. So it's a skill.
I mean, that sounds like an incredibly mature response to probably a very heavy question. I mean, looking back to when you were first starting midwifery, what would be, you know, now you've got this experience, you've gone through a lot of that, what would be sort of your top tip? Your top tip, you go, this is what you need to be aware of. Going in, you know, with your eyes wide open, this is what you need to look out for. This is what you need to sort of be ready for.
Yeah, I mean, part of my role as a midwife is also to be a mentor. So most hospitals are teaching hospitals, so you'll have student midwives. And I love education. I love sharing knowledge and imparting that on somebody else so that they can have a good experience or a better experience, or maybe even change their view on how they found it so far. But I always say to students, you know, I think at the end of the day, you aren't going into this because it's a job to do for now. You're going into it with a passion for it. And it's really easy to have that passion knocked out of you in that kind of stressful environment and under those pressures. It's easy to lose that. But I think you've always got to remember that what you're doing is actually making a difference in that person's life forevermore. Because let's face it, people only have babies once, twice, 3, 4 times maybe in their entire life. And so it's such a pivotal, life-changing moment that you want to give that person the best experience possible, no matter what the outcome, no matter what the birth situation is. You want them to come away with a feeling of empowerment and happiness, and you want them to have that because that's going to remain with them for the rest of their life.
I feel like that was so beautifully encapsulated. You should almost just be the advertisement for the NHS for this is why you should go into midwifery. So on such a positive note, I think we'll close that one off there, Cara, because
Perfect.
you got that one in the feels.